What if I told you that the ancient giants spoken of in the Bible never truly disappeared? What if they're still among us? The mention of the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4 has sparked curiosity, fear, and fascination for centuries. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. The phrase, "and also afterward," hangs in the air like a lingering whisper, teasing the imagination of every theologian, historian, and conspiracy theorist who has ever studied it. If they were on the earth afterward, then where did they go? According to Scripture, the Nephilim were the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. The sons of God, often interpreted as fallen angels or divine beings, saw human women and took them as wives, resulting in a race of hybrid beings. These creatures were not ordinary men. They were giants, heroes of old, men of renown. They were larger, stronger, and perhaps even more intelligent than mere mortals. Their very existence posed a threat so significant that God saw it necessary to send the Great Flood. But here's the unsettling part. Genesis doesn't say the flood wiped them all out. It says they were there before and after the flood. Could it be that some survived? If so, where did they go? Some believe that the flood was not a total extinction event for the Nephilim, but a means of reducing their influence. What if their bloodline continued through a remnant? Many speculate that the Nephilim bloodline survived through the descendants of Noah's sons, especially Ham. After the flood, Noah's family repopulated the earth, and it is from Ham's lineage that we see the rise of ancient empires such as Egypt, Canaan, and Babylon. And wouldn't you know it, these very regions are teeming with tales of giants, strange hybrid beings, and demigod kings. Coincidence? Or could it be evidence of a hidden bloodline carried through history, hiding in plain sight? What if the bloodline of the Nephilim exists today, concealed in the elite, the rulers, and the powerful? Could their traits be present in certain families, quietly passed down through generations? If so, how could we recognize them? Would they look like us? Act like us? Or would they be something more? These questions have haunted mankind since ancient times. They've been whispered in secret societies, hinted at in religious texts, and immortalized in folklore. The Nephilim, these heroes of old, men of renown, may not have vanished after all. Their legacy might still be alive, subtly influencing the world from the shadows. Look around. Could you recognize a Nephilim bloodline if you saw it? Some believe they are hidden in the royal families, the elite, and the wealthiest of the world, those untouchable untouchables. After all, would they not seek to preserve their lineage just as any powerful bloodline would? This is where the story truly begins. The ancient Nephilim may not be as ancient as we think. What comes next will challenge everything you think you know about history, mythology, and the very world we live in today. What ancient texts tried to warn us about the Nephilim? Texts that were hidden, banned, or lost to time. The Bible isn't the only ancient source that speaks of the Nephilim. If anything, Genesis 6 is just the beginning of a far more complex tale. To understand the full scope of the Nephilim story, we must venture beyond the Bible and into the forgotten scrolls and suppressed texts of ancient civilizations. One of the most revealing sources is the Book of Enoch, a text that was revered in early Jewish and Christian communities, but later declared apocryphal, too dangerous, perhaps, for mainstream theology. The Book of Enoch gives us names, details, and shocking revelations. It speaks of the Watchers, a group of 200 rebellious angels who descended to earth, took human wives, and bore monstrous offspring, the Nephilim. Unlike the brief mention in Genesis, Enoch spares no detail. He describes the Watchers as powerful, otherworldly beings who shared forbidden knowledge with humans: astronomy, metallurgy, sorcery, and warcraft. This knowledge gave birth to technological leaps in human civilization, but at a cost. Their hybrid children, the Nephilim, grew into destructive giants, plundering the earth and devouring everything in their path. The Book of Jubilees, another apocryphal text, adds to this. It names the evil spirits that were born from the spirits of the Nephilim after their deaths. These disembodied spirits, according to Jubilees, became the demons that still roam the earth today, seeking to corrupt mankind. If true, then every encounter with an unclean spirit in the New Testament might be linked to the Nephilim's bloodline, a remnant of their influence still present after thousands of years. But it doesn't end there. Cultures around the world tell eerily similar stories. The ancient Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, divine beings who descended to Earth and influenced human affairs. Were the Anunnaki just another name for the Watchers? The Greek Titans, the Norse Jotnar, frost giants, and the Mayan tales of hybrid demigods all follow the same pattern. Divine beings intermingling with humanity, resulting in beings of immense size, power, and knowledge. Why do so many cultures echo the same story? Did they all invent it independently, or were they recording a shared experience? Ancient texts, often seen as mythology, may be much closer to history than we think. More disturbing is the idea that some of these texts were deliberately hidden or banned. Early church fathers debated which books were safe for public consumption. The Council of Laodicea, c. 364 AD, removed certain books from the biblical canon, including Enoch and Jubilees. Why? Some believe it was an effort to suppress knowledge of the Nephilim and their bloodline. Could it be that these ancient texts were removed not for theological reasons but for control? Were they trying to keep the truth about the Nephilim hidden from the masses? If so, then what else do they know that we don't? Consider this. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1946, among them were fragments of Enoch, Jubilees, and other writings that echoed the story of the Nephilim. Suddenly, after centuries of silence, the world was reminded of these forbidden texts. But official interpretations remain controlled. Fragments are studied in isolation, and only certain scholars have access. What do they know that we don't? If even half of these texts are accurate, then the story of the Nephilim is more than an ancient curiosity, it's a warning. Hidden texts, banned scriptures, and suppressed knowledge point to something that someone, somewhere, didn't want you to know. What if those secrets were never meant to be uncovered? What if the Nephilim didn't die but simply changed, adapting to the world around them? Most people assume that the great flood of Noah's time wiped out every single Nephilim. After all, that was the whole point of the flood, wasn't it? To cleanse the world of corruption? But what if we misunderstood what cleansing meant? Genesis 6:4 makes it clear that the Nephilim were on the earth both before and after the flood. That small, easily overlooked phrase, "and also afterward," has sparked endless debate. If they were still on the earth after the flood, how did they survive? Did they hide? Did they evolve? One theory suggests that not all Nephilim were destroyed in the flood. Perhaps some of them were hidden away in deep subterranean caves or massive underground chambers. The ancient world had places of mystery and darkness, from the hidden catacombs of ancient Egypt to the labyrinthine tunnels of Cappadocia. Could remnants of the Nephilim bloodline have been preserved in these underground havens? Consider this. The Canaanites, the Philistines, and other post-flood civilizations all recorded encounters with giants. Goliath, the towering Philistine warrior, was just one of several giants mentioned in the Bible. The Anakim, the Rephaim, and the Zamzummim are all described as giant races that the Israelites had to confront after the flood. Where did these giants come from if the flood had wiped them all out? Another theory is more chilling. What if the Nephilim bloodline wasn't destroyed, but instead became diluted? The wives of Noah's sons may have carried the genetic imprint of the Nephilim, unknowingly passing down fragments of their DNA through the generations. This idea opens the door to a shocking possibility, that traces of Nephilim blood still exist today in humanity itself. What if some of us are walking around with the genetic remnants of the Nephilim flowing through our veins? Could this explain why certain people exhibit superhuman strength, intellect, or charisma? Could the most powerful figures in history, emperors, kings, and even modern world leaders, have unknowingly inherited these traits from the bloodline of giants? This brings us to the notion of elite bloodlines. Throughout history, there have been whispers about royal blood and divine right. the belief that kings and queens are chosen by God to rule. But what if it wasn't God who chose them, but rather their ancestry? Could it be that the so-called divine right of kings is rooted in a Nephilim bloodline? Some theorists point to the deliberate inbreeding of royal families as evidence of this. European monarchs often married their cousins, creating a closed genetic loop. If there was something special about their bloodline, something ancient and powerful, it would make sense to preserve it at all costs. The Habsburgs, the Merovingians, and even the so-called black nobility are rumored to have roots tracing back to something ancient, something hidden. If you think that sounds far-fetched, consider the global obsession with genealogy and ancestry testing. People all over the world are paying companies to analyze their DNA. But what are they really looking for? Many claim they just want to discover their roots. But what if the unseen hand guiding this trend is searching for something more? Could it be that someone, somewhere, is hunting for the markers of the Nephilim bloodline? If the Nephilim survived, if their blood runs in the veins of the powerful, then they aren't hiding, they're ruling. What if the Nephilim's greatest trick was convincing the world they were just myths? Mythology is often dismissed as pure fiction, a collection of stories invented by ancient cultures to explain the world around them. But what if mythology is a distorted memory of real events? What if the tales of giants, demigods, and hybrid creatures are echoes of a time when Nephilim walked the earth? Look at the world's most enduring myths. The Greek Titans were primordial giants that ruled the world before the Olympian gods overthrew them. The Norse Jotnar were colossal beings in constant conflict with the Aesir gods. Even in Native American folklore, tales of red-haired giants echo the same motif. Mighty, human-like beings of extraordinary size and power. But here's the twist. What if these so-called myths weren't fabricated at all? What if they were preserved memories of an ancient truth, a truth so unsettling that later societies rebranded it as legend? Consider the role of storytellers, scribes, and religious leaders throughout history. They didn't just tell stories, they preserved history. Many ancient cultures had oral traditions meant to pass on sacred knowledge, but when those stories are too dangerous or too controversial, they get rebranded as myth to downplay their significance. Could it be that the mythological giants of the world were just ancient attempts to warn us about the Nephilim? And then there's the archaeological evidence. Around the world, strange discoveries of giant bones and oversized skulls have sparked controversy. In North America, early newspaper reports from the 1800s documented the unearthing of gigantic human skeletons. These discoveries, often in burial mounds, were described as 9 to 12 feet tall. Farmers and amateur archaeologists alike claim to have seen these bones, only for them to mysteriously disappear after being handed over to official institutions. One of the most infamous examples is the Smithsonian conspiracy theory. Critics claim that the Smithsonian Institution played a role in collecting and disappearing giant skeletons to maintain the accepted narrative of human evolution. If evidence of Nephilim bones existed, it would challenge everything we think we know about anthropology. Why have so many records of these finds vanished? Why do historical newspaper articles remain, but the bones themselves are nowhere to be found? The same pattern emerges with ancient architecture. Sites like Baalbek in Lebanon and the stone megaliths of Peru contain stones so large that even modern machinery would struggle to move them. The official explanation is that early human societies used primitive tools and brute force to transport and stack them. But how plausible is that? Did humans really have the means to lift 200-ton stones with nothing but wood, rope, and muscle? Perhaps it wasn't humans at all. Perhaps it was the Nephilim. Their size and strength would have made them natural builders. Could they have been the master architects behind the cyclopean structures scattered across the globe? If so, then the traces of their work are right in front of us, in plain sight. All of this points to a troubling possibility. The Nephilim are not only present in the ancient stories of humanity, they may have left behind physical evidence. Evidence that was so controversial, so disruptive to the modern narrative that it had to be buried. Why? To what end? If the truth about the Nephilim were widely known, it would rewrite human history, theology, and science. It would also force us to confront the idea that the Nephilim's influence is not just ancient. It might still be active. Are the elite hiding their true ancestry? And could they be hiding it in plain sight? If the Nephilim bloodline still exists, then where would it be most visible? The answer may be hiding in plain sight, within the world's wealthiest families, secret societies, and global power structures. Let's consider the idea of elite bloodlines. From the pharaohs of Egypt to the monarchs of Europe, certain families have claimed divine ancestry, often tracing their lineage back to gods, giants, or beings of supernatural origin. This is no coincidence. If they were descendants of Nephilim, it would explain why they guarded their bloodline so fiercely. Take, for instance, the Merovingian dynasty. This ancient European bloodline claimed descent from a sea beast that impregnated one of their ancestors. While that sounds strange on the surface, many have pointed out the parallels to the story of divine beings, like the Watchers, interbreeding with humans. Could the beast in this story be a symbolic reference to a Nephilim ancestor? Then there's the Black Nobility, a collection of ultra-wealthy families that trace their power back to the Roman Empire. Their influence persists in modern finance, media, and politics. Conspiracy theorists argue that these families are part of a long-term effort to preserve a hidden bloodline. To do this, they maintain control over key industries and financial institutions, ensuring that outsiders never break into their inner circle. But perhaps the most famous example of elite secrecy is the Illuminati. Whether real or a myth, the Illuminati are often depicted as an unseen hand that manipulates world events from the shadows. What if their ultimate goal isn't just to consolidate power, but to preserve a bloodline? Could their obsession with secrecy, symbology, and esoteric knowledge be rooted in the belief that they carry a divine or Nephilim lineage? And what of the obsession with blue bloods? The term blue blood refers to noble aristocratic families. The name comes from the visible blue veins seen under pale, aristocratic skin. But what if there's more to it than that? Some believe it points to a difference in blood itself, a subtle genetic marker that separates them from the common man. Could this be a sign of an ancient, hidden bloodline? Today we see echoes of this obsession with genetic preservation. Private genealogy companies now offer DNA testing, and millions of people are submitting their genetic information to massive databases. What's happening behind the scenes with all that data? Some suggest that the powerful are searching for markers, genetic anomalies that point to the presence of Nephilim DNA. This brings us to an unsettling thought. If Nephilim descendants walk among us, would they look human? Maybe, but maybe not. Their physiology could be different, taller, stronger, faster, more intelligent, or even more charismatic. Could this explain why certain figures in media, politics, and business seem almost larger than life? Think of historical figures who seem to possess unnatural power over the masses. Figures like Alexander the Great, Napoleon, and even modern political leaders. Some theorists have suggested that these men may have had traits reminiscent of the Nephilim, charisma that borders on hypnotic, strength that defies explanation, and the ability to shape world events like chess pieces on a board. If you think this is far-fetched, consider how often symbols of giants and divine beings appear in art, architecture, and media. From ancient statues of towering figures to modern films like superheroes and gods, these icons are everywhere. Are they reminders of an ancient truth hidden in plain sight? Could we be glorifying the Nephilim's descendants without even realizing it? The deeper you go, the more obvious it becomes. The elite may not just be powerful people. They may be the inheritors of an ancient divine bloodline. What if the Nephilim bloodline is not just a thing of the past, but an active force today? The idea that the Nephilim bloodline could exist in modern times might sound far-fetched at first, but is it really? Every major religion speaks of supernatural beings influencing humanity. But what if that influence is more direct, more physical than we ever imagined? Modern theorists have proposed that descendants of the Nephilim may not look like giants anymore. Their massive stature may have diminished, but their influence and genetic traits might have adapted to fit modern society. After all, if survival means blending in, wouldn't they evolve to look like us? The heroes of old, men of renown, could now be leaders, innovators, and cultural icons. Some even point to celebrities, politicians, and CEOs as modern-day Nephilim descendants. Their overwhelming influence, inexplicable rise to power, and larger-than-life personas fit the biblical description. Take a moment and think about the world's most famous figures, those whose words and actions seem to shift the world like pieces on a chessboard. Are they just charismatic? Or is there something more at work? But how would you recognize them? If they no longer resemble giants, how could they be identified? Here's where things get strange. According to some modern watchmen, people who believe they're tracking the Nephilim, there are physical and behavioral traits that might give them away. Unusual height or proportions. While modern descendants might not be 12 feet tall, they might still have noticeable height, long limbs, or other anomalies. NBA players and certain models are often used as examples, though this theory is controversial at best. Unnatural intelligence or talent. From childhood prodigies to genius-level intellects, some people seem born with knowledge and skills that defy explanation. This could be a sign of Nephilim influence, hypnotic charisma, or influence. Figures who rise to power seemingly overnight, gaining the devotion of millions, are sometimes viewed with suspicion. Is their rise due to raw talent, or is there something deeper at play? Unexplained wealth and power. If elite bloodlines trace back to Nephilim ancestry, their generational wealth would make sense. They'd have centuries to consolidate power, and with modern corporations and financial institutions, that power only grows. This is where things get unsettling. If the Nephilim bloodline truly exists today, it wouldn't be random. It would be deliberate. There would be systems in place to preserve, protect, and hide it. Some believe secret societies and powerful organizations are part of that plan. The Freemasons, the Bilderberg Group, and the Council on Foreign Relations are frequently mentioned in this context. The idea of secret societies keeping the bloodline intact is hardly new. Ancient royal families used strict, selective marriage practices to keep their blood pure. If modern elites are doing the same, it wouldn't be difficult to imagine them forming exclusive clubs and secret orders to maintain their legacy. But here's where it gets even more controversial. Some people claim that advances in modern genetics, like CRISPR and DNA editing, are being used to enhance and protect the bloodline. If Nephilim DNA still exists, could it be extracted, isolated, and reintroduced into new human hosts? Cloning, hybridization, and super soldier programs are no longer the realm of science fiction. If you could recreate a being with the power and intellect of the Nephilim, wouldn't certain organizations try? More disturbing still is the idea that some of the world's wealthiest families might not only preserve their bloodlines, but actively search for Nephilim traits among the public. The rapid rise of ancestry databases like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA has created a global DNA catalog. What if that data is being used to locate individuals who unknowingly carry fragments of Nephilim DNA? If a marker were found in someone's genes, would they be recruited, studied, or quietly watched from afar? This isn't just speculation. Former intelligence operatives have revealed that data from DNA testing companies has been accessed by government agencies, while the official story is that it's used for tracking criminals. Others suspect a deeper motive. Could they be searching for something specific, something ancient? And here's the big question. If the Nephilim bloodline still exists and its descendants walk among us, what is their goal? Do they seek power, control, or something more? Are they waiting for a time to reclaim the world they once ruled? If they've been hiding in plain sight all this time, then one thing is certain. They're not just waiting. They're planning. What if the modern obsession with superhumans is really a subconscious desire to return to the Nephilim? We live in an era where society is obsessed with superhuman abilities. Look at modern films, TV shows, and books. Superheroes, demigods, and figures with extraordinary powers dominate our cultural landscape. Why? Could it be that we are instinctively drawn to something ancient within us? A subconscious longing for the Nephilim? The story of superheroes follows a pattern we've seen before. Beings with immense strength, knowledge, and influence walk among ordinary people, often hiding in plain sight. They're depicted as protectors, leaders, or even conquerors. If you look closely, the parallels with the Nephilim are hard to ignore. Take the character of Superman, one of the most iconic figures in pop culture. He's a being who comes from another realm, Krypton, and possesses powers beyond mortal men: flight, super strength, and invulnerability. Replace the name Krypton with heaven, and you have the biblical story of the Watchers descending to Earth. The same could be said of characters like Thor, a godlike figure from another realm, and Wonder Woman, a hybrid of divine and human ancestry. Are these fictional heroes echoes of something deeply embedded in human memory? But the influence of the Nephilim goes beyond movies. Look at the world of sports. People flock to stadiums to watch athletes perform physical feats that defy belief: speed, strength, and agility that seem almost superhuman. Could it be that we are drawn to these figures because they remind us on a subconscious level of the Nephilim? Perhaps their abilities echo the heroes of old described in Genesis. Then there's the concept of genetic enhancement. In recent years, research into gene editing with CRISPR technology has made it possible to modify the human genome. Scientists have already experimented with editing out genetic diseases, but what if they go further? Some experts suggest that in the near future, we could create designer babies with increased intelligence, strength, and lifespan. If that sounds familiar, it should. It's exactly what the Nephilim were said to be. Some conspiracy theorists take it a step further. They argue that genetic manipulation isn't new, it's ancient. What if the Watchers didn't just mix their DNA with human women, but actively altered human genetics? If that's true, then modern attempts at genetic enhancement might be part of an ongoing plan to reawaken the dormant traits of the Nephilim. You don't have to look far to see signs of this in pop culture. TV shows and movies about mutants, superhumans, and enhanced humans are everywhere. From the X-Men to Captain America, the idea of creating a better human is constantly repeated. Why? Could it be that this idea is being planted into the collective consciousness? Are we being prepared for the next step in human evolution, the return of the Nephilim bloodline? If this is true, then it poses a serious question. Are we being programmed to accept the Nephilim's return? If humanity becomes obsessed with superhuman traits, how long before we begin to worship those who exhibit them? How long before we crown them as kings, just as we did with the demigods of old? Imagine this. A public figure suddenly emerges, unlike any other. They have charisma that borders on hypnotic. Their physical prowess is unmatched. Their intellect seems limitless. People flock to them, desperate to hear them speak. They're not just a leader. They're a symbol of something greater. Would you recognize them as a Nephilim descendant, or would you mistake them for a savior? If you think this is impossible, remember that humanity has done this before. We've raised up emperors, pharaohs, and kings, calling them divine. The return of the Nephilim may not come in the form of war. It may come through adoration. What if the Nephilim bloodline is not just hiding, but actively preparing for a return to power? If the Nephilim bloodline still exists, it's not unreasonable to assume that they have a purpose. After all, ancient beings with superior intellect and strength wouldn't simply fade into obscurity. They would plan, they would scheme, and they would prepare. But for what? Many researchers point to a specific event referenced in both the Bible and other religious texts: the return of the Watchers. The Watchers, the fallen angels who fathered the Nephilim, were punished by being bound in chains in the abyss. According to the Book of Enoch, these Watchers are to be released at the end of days. This idea is echoed in the Book of Revelation, where we hear of the bottomless pit being opened and supernatural forces being released upon the earth. If the Nephilim are their descendants, then what would stop them from preparing the world for the return of their forefathers? Some believe that world events are being subtly manipulated to achieve this very goal. The increased focus on AI, genetic engineering, and transhumanism has sparked concerns that humanity is moving toward a post-human state. Could this be part of a grander plan to usher in a new breed of beings, a return to the days of the Nephilim? If you doubt it, consider this. We're already merging human intelligence with machines through brain-computer interfaces. Transhumanist thinkers openly discuss enhancing human capabilities beyond natural limits. This echoes the exact role the Watchers played when they taught forbidden knowledge to humanity. If the same knowledge is now being rediscovered, are we repeating the days of Noah? Monuments, rituals, and symbols. And then there are the symbols. From ancient temples to modern corporate logos, Nephilim symbology is everywhere. Obelisks, pyramid structures, and all-seeing eyes appear in places of power. The obelisks of ancient Egypt, which symbolized divine power, were replicated in modern landmarks like the Washington Monument. But why? Why does this imagery persist across centuries, nations, and cultures? Some believe that these symbols are not just aesthetic choices. They are ritual markers, beacons that align spiritual energy with the goals of those who control them. If elite bloodlines are indeed tied to the Nephilim, then the creation of these monuments might be a subtle act of dominance, a way of reclaiming control over the earth. After all, wouldn't the Nephilim want to see their symbols ruling over humanity once more? Consider also the rituals observed by secret societies. The Bohemian Grove, for instance, is a place where powerful figures from around the world gather in secret. Reports claim they perform symbolic rituals in front of a massive stone owl. But owls are traditionally linked to wisdom, knowledge, and hidden truth, all traits associated with the Watchers. Could this be a symbolic homage to them? The days of Noah. Jesus himself gave a chilling prophecy. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Matthew 24:37. This prophecy has been interpreted in many ways, but one popular theory is that it points to the return of the Nephilim. If the Watchers and their descendants were present in the days of Noah, and Jesus says those days will repeat, then what does that imply? If modern science is recreating the conditions of those days through genetic manipulation, secret societies are reestablishing the Nephilim's symbolic power, and society as a whole is being conditioned to admire superhumans. Then perhaps the stage is being set for their return. But here's the most unsettling part. If the Nephilim bloodline exists within modern elites, and they still revere their ancestors, then they aren't just preserving their heritage. They're awaiting a return of their kings. Could modern science be the key to reawakening the Nephilim? In the ancient world, it was the Watchers who shared forbidden knowledge with humanity. Metallurgy, astronomy, and sorcery. Today we call it technology, genetics, and artificial intelligence. The question is, are we rediscovering this knowledge on our own, or is it being given to us just like before? Genetic science has reached a point where we can literally alter the code of life. Techniques like CRISPR gene editing allow scientists to modify the DNA of plants, animals, and humans. The stated goal is to eliminate diseases, but some worry that this is just the beginning. What happens when scientists start enhancing human traits? Strength, intelligence, lifespan, these are all things that could be changed with CRISPR. In other words, we could be recreating the Nephilim. The prospect of a superhuman race has already been discussed by futurists and technologists. Some refer to it as the next phase of evolution, a concept called Homo Deus, the God-man. If you were to describe the Nephilim, wouldn't they fit this description? Half divine, half human beings with superior intellect and physical traits. Sounds eerily familiar. If this theory is true, then the Nephilim bloodline may not even need to be preserved naturally. It could be reintroduced artificially. If a secret organization wanted to bring back Nephilim traits, they wouldn't need to wait for natural reproduction. They could extract the DNA from ancient remains or use stored genetic samples. Remember, giant skeletons have been unearthed across the world, and while the bones are said to disappear, what if they were taken to secret labs for study? Transhumanism and the digital soul. It doesn't stop with genetics. The modern transhumanist movement dreams of merging the human mind with machines. This is known as uploading consciousness or achieving digital immortality. The wealthy are already funding projects to create mind copies or digital twins, replicas of their consciousness stored in a cloud. If successful, the human soul could be preserved in a digital format forever. This is eerily similar to something we see in ancient texts. The disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, after being destroyed, were said to become evil spirits, restless, wandering the earth. Could a modern transhumanist version of this exist? Imagine the consciousness of a Nephilim descendant being uploaded to a supercomputer or a cloud system. Would it be any different from the wandering spirits described in Enoch? Are we being groomed for their return? Everything from video games to movies is filled with themes of becoming superhuman. Children are being exposed to the idea that upgrading themselves with technology is normal, even desirable. Is it all innocent entertainment? Or could this be part of a larger plan to normalize human enhancement? It's clear that modern science is treading dangerous ground. We're rewriting the laws of biology, extending human potential and blurring the line between man and machine. If the Watchers once corrupted humanity by sharing forbidden knowledge, what happens when today's scientists do the same? Could it be that all of this is preparing the world for the return of the Nephilim bloodline? Are the Nephilim still among us today? It's a question that has echoed throughout this entire journey. From ancient texts to modern technology, from secret societies to elite bloodlines, one truth seems undeniable. Something ancient is still at work in our world, and if we trace the evidence, the path becomes clear. The Nephilim were described as mighty beings, hybrid creatures with divine power. They were supposed to have been wiped out by the flood, but Genesis 6:4 leaves the door open with the phrase, "and also afterward." That single phrase challenges everything we thought we knew. If they existed after the flood, where did they go? The answer might be right in front of us. Through ancient mythologies, secret societies, elite bloodlines, and modern genetic science, there are too many coincidences to ignore. Giants in Canaan, strange skulls found in burial mounds, forbidden texts like Enoch and Jubilees, all of them point to the same story. These beings didn't vanish. They hid in plain sight. Look to the powerful. If the Nephilim bloodline still exists, then where would it be most visible? Look at those who have shaped history. Rulers, kings, emperors, and modern elite families have one thing in common. They believe their bloodline is special. Royal families claim to have divine right to rule, a right granted by the gods or divine beings. Does this sound familiar? It should. It's the same story as the Nephilim. Even in modern times, this obsession with royal blood has not gone away. The richest and most powerful families still maintain closed bloodlines, using marriage as a tool to preserve their line. The idea of being blue-blooded may sound like a social class term, but could it be something much deeper? Could it refer to a bloodline that is not fully human? And then there are the secret societies. The Freemasons, the Illuminati, the Bohemian Grove, what do they all have in common? Secrecy, rituals, symbols of divine power. The obelisk, the all-seeing eye, the compass and square, these aren't random symbols. They are ancient icons that trace back to the age of the Watchers. If the Nephilim still exist, these societies might be how they pass down knowledge, preserve their bloodline, and prepare for the future. Look to science. If the Nephilim's power came from their genetics, then the key to their return would be found in genetics and DNA manipulation. Look around. Genetic modification is no longer science fiction, it's reality. CRISPR gene editing, cloning, and the race to create superhumans are all evidence that modern science is reaching back into ancient knowledge. If elite families are secretly preserving Nephilim DNA, as some theorists claim, then it would only be a matter of time before they reintroduce it into the population. Some have speculated that modern DNA testing services like 23andMe and Ancestry.com are being used to search for genetic markers linked to Nephilim ancestry. The DNA is collected, analyzed, and stored. If a specific genetic sequence is found, it could be traced back to the individual carrying it. And once it's found, what happens next? Could that person be recruited, contacted, or even brought into the fold of a secret order? If Nephilim traits like intelligence, charisma, or physical power are hiding in plain sight, then those with the right genes may already be among us, unknowingly fulfilling a prophecy. Look to culture. If all of this sounds like speculation, consider this. The world is being prepared to worship superhumans. Our culture is obsessed with the concept of becoming more. From superhero movies to transhumanist ideologies, we are being told that it's normal, even good, to evolve beyond humanity. But who benefits from that idea? Look at the media. Superheroes are gods in modern mythology. Superman, Thor, and Wonder Woman aren't just characters. They're reflections of ancient figures. They have divine strength, unmatched power, and the ability to shape the world. Who does that remind you of? The Nephilim. The heroes of old described in Genesis 6 were also men of renown, larger-than-life figures who shaped the world. This isn't just entertainment. It's a reprogramming of the human mind. We're being taught to admire these figures, to accept them as protectors and saviors. If a modern-day Nephilim figure were to rise on the world stage, would people see them as a threat or a messianic figure? History shows us that people have always crowned figures like this as kings. What comes next? If all of this is true, then we have to ask ourselves, what comes next? If the Nephilim bloodline still exists, it means they have survived every attempt to wipe them out. It means they have been planning, waiting, and preparing for a moment to rise again. Some believe that we are living in the days of Noah once more. Genetic manipulation, hybrid creatures, and elite rulers claiming divine ancestry are all signs of a return to the past. And if Jesus said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man," then what does that mean for us today? Are we on the brink of their return? If they are still here, they won't reveal themselves as monsters. They'll look like us, act like us, lead us. They will rise to power and they will claim to be our saviors. Perhaps they already have. So, are the Nephilim still among us today? Look at those who rule. Look at those who lead. Look at those who call themselves divine. The answer might be standing right in front of you.
Thank you for joining us today on Let Us Pray. If you or a loved one is in need of prayer, we invite you to leave a comment with your name or the name of the person you would like us to pray for. Our community of believers will join together to pray for you and for all those who have requested prayer. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Please share this video with someone who needs it. If you have any specific prayer requests, please let us know in the comments. We are here to pray with you and for you. May God bless you and bring peace and comfort to your life. Amen.